Welcome to my Bake Escape. Today I'm sharing a little bit of a different recipe with you. I love pizza, and last year we purchased this Ooni gas burning pizza oven that I love. We now make pizzas at least twice a month, and I'm going to share my favorite recipe for making delicious homemade pizza. You don't need this Ooni oven to do this. You can do this in a regular oven, but if you have an Ooni, this recipe is great to follow as well. For the full recipe, visit mybakeescape.com. Be sure to like and subscribe and follow me on Instagram at mybakeescape. So what I want to share with you first is the type of dough mix that I use. When we first got the oven, I tried various recipes using a lot of different flours. One day shopping in a local grocery store, we saw that they had this kit, so we picked it up and we have absolutely loved it and have used it ever since. They are available on Amazon as well. I'll share the link below. The kit does have yeast, so as I have shared before on my channel, the perfect temperature to bloom yeast is between 105 to 110 degrees. So make sure that the water that you use for this is between those temperatures. So as you can see here, I'm using my thermometer to check the temperature, and it's 108.5 degrees, so it's perfect. The instructions for this pizza dough kit are super easy to follow, and the kit itself comes with 2 packets. The larger packet includes the flour mixture, and then the smaller packet is the yeast. To get started, pour out the flour mixture into a large bowl. The bowl needs to be large enough because you are going to mix the dough together, and you're also going to do a little bit of kneading inside of the bowl. So make sure you have a good size bowl. This is what the yeast looks like. I went ahead and used a fork to combine these two together. I also use this fork to start mixing once I add the water. So the packet calls for 1 1/4 cups of warm water. Depending on the temperature, the humidity in the air, you may need a little less or a little more. So as you can see, I didn't pour all of the water in all at once. I added almost all of it and then began mixing. And as I got to this point, I realized it was a little dry and needed a little bit more water. So I continued to mix with a fork. And this is what the dough looked like after mixing for a little bit. It's very rough, but this is pretty much where we're going to stop with a fork, and then I'm going to move on to kneading. By hand. A quick tip, if you're going to use a cutting board like I tend to do to knead my dough, wet a couple of paper towels, place them flat on the surface, and then place the cutting board on top. This is going to help minimize the amount of movement your cutting board. I went ahead and started kneading by hand. Kneading that dough. My goal here is to just bring all of the dough together, and as I'm mixing, there are parts of this dough that are wetter than others, so I'm just mixing this around, trying to gather up as much of that flour mixture as I can. And I noticed that it was still pretty dry, so I added probably about another tablespoon of water, and as you can see, that really did help bring everything together. You can see that the dough is pretty wet and sticky, so I like to pour a little bit of flour onto the work surface. I love this little container because it has like a sifting top, and so just a little bit of flour comes out. You don't want to add too much flour because it will change the texture of your dough. Now that you have the dough on to the lightly floured work surface, it's time to knead it. And this process takes a little under 5 minutes. And what you're going to need to do is, as you knead, if it becomes sticky, just add a little bit of flour. I added some to my hand there, and then just continue to work the dough until it becomes a nice smooth ball of dough. As you can see, it's starting to look smoother, and I kind of just turn it, and this is what you're looking for. The next step is to allow this dough to proof and double in size, and for that I'm going to use a nice clean bowl that I lightly spray with some olive oil. I place the dough in the bowl, roll it around a little bit just to coat all sides with that olive oil. You're going to want to use a medium-sized bowl, large enough so that the dough will have room to grow. I cover with plastic wrap and place this in a nice warm area of my kitchen, usually the inside of my microwave. And the dough is going to sit and rest for about 45 minutes until it doubles in size. While the dough rests, I like to work on the sauce. For the sauce, I use whole peeled tomatoes. I like this brand of canned tomatoes, and I like the San Marzano tomatoes from Italy. They just have a delicious flavor. So this is a 28-ounce can of whole peeled tomatoes. Anytime I open a can, I like to just wipe the top clean. Never know what kind of junk is sitting on top of that can, and I don't want any of that to get into my sauce. Look at how vibrant red these tomatoes are. They're so beautiful and full of flavor. I prefer a nice smooth pizza sauce. However, if you don't really care about the texture, you can cook this whole can of tomatoes as they are and kind of crush the tomatoes as they cook. But I like a nice smooth consistency, so I blend the tomatoes a little bit in my magic bullet. And I pulse just for a few seconds until the tomatoes are nice and blended. I'm going to cook the sauce in this saucepan, so I pour the blended tomatoes and then I add the rest of the sauce that was in the can. I love to use my mini spatulas to get out every bit of sauce from the can and the blender container. This can get messy, but if you clean as you go, it won't be so bad in the end. So to the sauce, I'm going to add some fresh basil. I just take a bunch and I tear it with my hands and add it directly to the sauce. I love fresh basil. It smells amazing. Now there are a few other ingredients that I add to this. I like to add a little bit of sugar because that helps with the acidity of the tomatoes. It helps balance out the acid, and so for this recipe I use only a half a teaspoon of granulated sugar. I also use garlic powder, and I added probably about half a teaspoon of garlic powder, and then I add a teaspoon of salt. This is a very basic recipe. I like the flavors. You can add a little bit of olive oil. You can also add fresh garlic. It's whatever your preference is. This is just the way I make my simple pizza sauce. This is going to cook on a low simmer for about 25 to 30 minutes. All right, so as you can see, the dough has doubled in size after sitting for 45 minutes. So at this point, you can place this in the refrigerator for up to 3 days. So you can make this ahead of time, and I actually prefer to make this at least a day ahead of time. It really allows the flavor of the dough to just bloom, and it makes the dough super airy and delicious. But you can also make it the same day. So once you reach this stage, if you do put it in the refrigerator, you'll take it out after a couple of days if you made this ahead of time, and then you will continue with this step. So what you want to do is place the dough on a lightly floured work surface. I'm going to cut this into 4 equal parts. I want to make 4 pizzas out of this dough. So I eyeball and cut 4 equal parts. You can use a food scale to get more precise sizing when it comes to splitting the dough up. For this, I just eyeballed it to get 4 equal parts. Then in order to help you later on when you are pressing the dough out into the pizza shape, you want to have a nice even ball of dough. So what I'm doing is I'm gathering the edges and just twisting and pressing them to the center of the ball. And once I get to this stage, I kind of just, using the palm of my hand, I cup the ball of dough and I lightly press down and roll it around the cutting board to just ensure that the bottom is smooth and that it is a nice round ball of dough. I have this proofing container that I picked up at a local restaurant supply shop. But if you have something similar with a lid, or even you can just get a big container and wrap it in plastic wrap, you could do that as well. I like to place some flour on the bottom, and I place these balls of dough with enough space in between because they will grow and I don't want them to get stuck to each other. So I also sprinkle a little bit more flour on the tops of each, place the lid on, and set this in a nice warm area in my kitchen and let this rise for about another hour and a half to 2 hours. I placed the sauce on the stove and let it cook on low for about 25 minutes, and this is what it looks like after. Look at the consistency. It's not too chunky, not too smooth. So I'm going to go ahead and let this cool down. While the sauce is cooling and the dough is proofing, I am going to work on the toppings. Now, I know this is a bit controversial, but I do love pineapple, especially when I do Canadian bacon and pineapple for a Hawaiian style. So yes, I'm adding pineapple. I also use 2 different types of cheeses when I make homemade pizza. I have both the fresh and then also this whole milk low moisture mozzarella. I went ahead and used this for this recipe because I already had it open, and it is drier in that it doesn't leave a lot of liquid when it bakes in the oven like the fresh mozzarella does. The fresh mozzarella also doesn't melt as nicely as this low moisture one. It tends to retain its shape and does release a lot of moisture. So you'll see that the pizza looks a little more wet when you use a fresh mozzarella. It's delicious though, and it's really up to you. For this video, I decided to go with the low moisture mozzarella, so I went ahead and grated it, and as you can see here, I start splitting it up into 4 even piles. And once you get the desired amount of cheese that you want for each pizza, then you're good to go. This is really up to your preference. I would recommend that you do not go overboard on the toppings when making these pizzas because it will make it more challenging to get them off of the peel and into the oven. Next, I move on to the meats. So I am making a Hawaiian pizza, and for that, I picked up some Canadian bacon. So a couple slices of Canadian bacon. Now on to pepperoni. I picked this brand up, and it's a larger pepperoni size. So I'm going to use some of this pepperoni. I decided to move the cheese onto another plate. And then I also had this other pepperoni that I had used previously. It's a smaller size and it has a great flavor. So I pulled that out. When you make pizzas often, you can use, the leftovers the following week. I did freeze the Canadian bacon and it turned out great when I thawed it out and used it in the future. So it was fine. I do like to make sure that things are the same size, so I'm cutting the larger pepperonis into smaller pieces. This just makes the eating experience a lot better when you take a bite of pizza and you have a huge pepperoni that just kind of drags out. It's kind of messy, so I like to cut the meats up into similar sizes. I did the same for the Canadian bacon. And then just to make it easier when making the pizzas, because they cook at such a high temperature and it cooks very fast, you kind of have to move quickly when preparing each pizza. So I like to make sure all the toppings are just ready to go. So I went ahead and took some time now to separate the meats, just to ensure that when it's time to top the pizzas, I could do it pretty quickly. At this time, I realized that I had a little bit too much pepperoni, so I went ahead and put some of that away for a later use. And onto the pineapple. So this is going to go with the Canadian bacon for that Hawaiian style pizza. Let me know in the comments what your favorite toppings are for pizza. I am not very picky. I love everything. I also added some fresh basil because that is also delicious to go on top. So now I have all the toppings for the pizza ready. The sauce has cooled down to, I would say, about room temperature. Look at how beautiful that looks. There you have it. All the toppings you need for homemade pizza. You can add whatever toppings you like if you make this pizza. That's what's so fun about making homemade pizza, is you control what you put on it. And these are the toppings that I use today, but I have made pizzas with lots of different toppings as well as sauces. Just have fun, be creative, and anything you make is going to be delicious. So at this point, the dough has rested for about 2 hours, and as you can see, they have doubled in size. And all these bubbles are starting to form, those air bubbles, and that is going to lend to a nice, beautiful, airy, tender dough. Something to keep in mind when using the Ooni oven, it does take a while for the oven to reach the perfect pizza cooking temperature. So you want to plan to start the oven about 45 minutes to an hour before you want to cook the pizzas. So my oven is now preheating. I do have a hand thermometer gun that I use to check the temperature. The goal is for the stone to be between 850 to 900 degrees Fahrenheit. Once it reaches that temperature, you're good to start cooking pizzas. While the oven continues to preheat, I'm going to share some of my finishing toppings that I like to add to my pizza. I do like things spicy, and this hot honey sauce from Trader Joe's is delicious. I also obviously love the classic crushed red pepper flakes and fresh Parmigiano Reggiano. I forgot to mention, sometimes I do like to add a few dollops of ricotta to the pizza before baking. It adds a creamy, delicious texture. So here are some of my favorite finishing toppings that I add. Let me know below what your favorite thing to top your pizzas with is. Next, I wanted to share is this flour that I use. This flour is made of a durum wheat, and it is a lot more coarse, and it's great for making pizzas. I like to use it when rolling out my pizza dough. I use this on the surface so that the dough doesn't stick to the surface, and I sprinkle this on the pizza peel itself. If you can't get your hands on this, just regular all-purpose flour will work just fine. So the Ooni does come with a thermometer, but as you can see below, it's saying it's 113 degrees. It's not accurate. I don't know what's going on with that, because I checked the temperature and it's actually, as you can see here, about 750 degrees, depending on what part you're testing on the stone. I would suggest investing in this type of thermometer just to make sure that the oven is at the proper temperature. So it's still not where we need it to be at about 850, so it needs a few more minutes. So I close the oven up and let it continue to heat up. After some time, I check the temperature again, and it is now at 850, so it's time to make the pizzas. The thing that's special about this type of dough and these pizzas is you really want to carefully pull and stretch the dough out to the preferred size. You can use a rolling pin, but I did it one time and it really made the dough tough and it didn't rise as much in the oven. So what you want to do is gently using your fingers, just kind of work the dough starting from the edges, and gravity will do a lot of the work, pulling that dough down, and as you just keep moving, it will gently stretch the dough out, and then you can lay it flat, and again, using your fingers and very gently just start stretching that dough, pressing in the center, just help it go out into a nice round pizza crust. Once you have a nice sized crust like this, you're ready to move on. Once the dough has been pressed out to the desired size, it's time to transfer it to the peel. Really important, you want to lightly flour the peel. You don't want to add too much flour because that will burn in the oven and it sticks to the pizza and it makes your pizza taste burned. So just a little bit, you want to be able to loosen that pizza from the peel, give it a little shake, and as long as it moves around like that, you're good to go. So next we're going to add the toppings, starting with the sauce. I add about 2 tablespoons of sauce to this pizza, and using the back of the spoon, I spread it as evenly as I can, leaving a border around the edge. Now, when you add your toppings, I will remind you that more toppings you add, the heavier the pizza will be, and it will make it challenging to remove it from the pizza peel when transferring it to the oven. So just be mindful of that. It will also make it harder for the pizza to cook completely through if you have way too many toppings. So I added a little bit of cheese, the pepperoni, and then I topped it with a little more cheese on top of the pepperoni. And before I take it to the oven, I give it a shake and it's a little loose, so we're good to go. I remove some of that cheese because it will burn, and this is ready to go to the oven. So this could be tricky, but you just want to quickly and carefully transfer the pizza by gently shaking it until it releases from the peel onto the stone. Close the oven and watch it cook. Now this is going to go fast, so you don't want to walk away. You want to let it cook until you start to see a lot of bubbles forming. Once you start to see those bubbles forming, you can start moving the pizza around using either the peel that we used previously, or I have a smaller one that helps move the pizza around once it's in the oven. So you can see there's some big bubbles forming there, so we kind of just move it around a little bit, turn it slightly, let it cook for a couple more seconds, and then turn it again. You want to keep turning it so that it cooks evenly on the top and the bottom. This fire is hot, the oven is very hot, so this will burn if you do not watch it. These pizzas cook pretty quickly, probably about 90 seconds. Once you take it out of the oven, the time that it takes you to make your next pizza, the oven usually does go back up to temperature. It's very nice to make about 4 pizzas pretty quickly. Look at how delicious that looks. The pepperoni is crispy along the edges. That cheese is fully melted. There's a little bit of char. It looks so delicious. One trick is to have some of these cooling racks ready. You don't want to place the pizza on a surface because it will steam and get soggy, but if you want to let them cool on a cooling rack like this, it'll keep that nice crispy crust. After you bake your pizzas, if you have a crowd, you're making, 4, 5, or 6 pizzas, another tip I have is to place these cooling racks in the oven at about 275 degrees. As the pizzas come out of the Ooni, you place them in your oven and they stay warm until all of your pizzas are cooked, and then you can enjoy them together. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to check out the full recipe on my website at mybakeescape.com. If you did like this video, hit that like button, subscribe to my channel. Let me know below what other items you'd like to see me bake in my Ooni oven in the future. Thank you so much for watching and have a sweet day. Oops. And now we're gonna get this open.